Perfect. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our eLotus webinar today. My name is Donna, and I will be your host and your moderator for today's class. Here at Lotus Institute of Integrative Medicine, we have been holding educational seminars and webinars for over a decade now. And it's been such a wonderful journey filled with many experiences and lessons taught by speakers who are not only experts in their respective fields, but more importantly, they're willing to share their wealth of knowledge with all of us. We believe that the future of TCM and the advancement of Chinese medicine can only be obtained through continued growth, learning, and progress. And that's our goal here at eLotus, and we are so glad to have you guys join us this morning. So let's get to know each other. So how many of you guys, this is your first eLotus webinar? Type 1 into the chat room. Okay, so far I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a handful of people. Congratulations on coming to your very first webinar, and this is actually going to be a really good one. There's not a lot of, I've been to a lot of webinars and seminars, and I've noticed there's not a lot of classes on vaginal steaming. So first, I'd like to thank you guys for being here, and especially the men. I know it's, you don't have the parts, but, yeah, this topic is very, it's not really out there yet. It's seen as taboo and trendy, especially when celebrities are out there promoting it. And with more practitioners, I feel, that learn this stuff and educate their patients, the more people will be using it. And I find that it's very helpful. The very first time I heard about vaginal steaming was with Heather Bruce. And when she first talked about it, I remember thinking, oh, that's nice. Because the only thing that I'm steaming right now are vegetables. I'm not going to be steaming anything else. And then we had a webinar with Chris, and she was talking about vaginal steaming, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. And she's like, just use, I remember she said, okay, you can use water and just use a little sea salt. And I was like, okay. So go home, I tried, and I was like, oh, and fast forward to today, I really can see a difference in my menstrual cycles, and that's what she's going to be talking to you about later. And I actually got a custom stool made too, so I'm fancy now. Yeah. All right. So how many of you guys, this is your first class on vaginal steaming? Type in, yeah, good. Wow. Type in 1. Wow, there's a lot. Oh, yay. So Chris is going to pop your cherry. Okay, good. All right, very good, you guys. Okay, so let me go ahead and, yes, I did say that, sorry. Oh, Tisa, your friend Heather Rice is here. Let me go ahead and give you guys a short tour of the webinar room, and then we can get started. So what you're seeing on your screen on the top left-hand corner is the video feed, and to the right of the video feed is the PowerPoint for today's class. And these PowerPoints, you have them available for download as lecture note handouts. And you can choose to print 6 slides to a page or 2 slides to a page. And then the bottom, you'll find 2 boxes. You guys look like you already know how to use the chat room. This is where you can connect with your colleagues who are attending from all over the world. And we have people logging in from all over. If you want to go ahead and type in where you are watching today's class from in the chat room. And then to the right of the chat room, you'll find upcoming events here at eLotus. If you have any troubleshooting issue, we'll pull up the box for you. And then also, oh, if you've seen an old friend and you want to private chat with them, let's go back to the chat room now. So in the chat room, on the top right-hand corner, you'll find a menu icon. You can click on that, and then you can select who you would like to start a private chat with. If you have any technical issues, or if you have questions for the moderator, which is me, you can select your private chat to the host. Now, the Adobe interface only allows 1 login per user, so if you're logged in more than once, you'll hear an echoing sound. To resolve that echoing, just go ahead and close the extra login, or after a period of time, Adobe does help remove it for you. And if you do experience any technical issues such as slowing, skipping, or stopping, the first thing that you want to do is check your internet connection. This most likely happens with people who are using a wireless connection because it's not 100% stable. So you can sit closer to your router, or you can also, if that doesn't work, just let us know and we'll try our best to help you get the most internet juice from your internet provider. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Today's class is steaming the Jade Gate. Hint, hint, that's the vaginal canal. Vaginal steaming for reproductive wellness with Kristin Gonzales. Kristin specializes in women's healing arts. She teaches her female patients how to gain an understanding of the biological rhythms within the lens of Chinese medicine. She educates on gracefully approaching the 7-year cycle of women, menstrual attunement, and longevity medicine. She is a certified healer within practice leader from the Institute of Integral Qigong and Tai Chi. She's also resident acupuncture for Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute, where she provides herbal consultation and education on perineal steaming for healing gynecological and andrological conditions using steam and smoke therapy, also known as fumigation therapy in Chinese medicine. So yes, today not only will you learn how to steam your vagina, you'll also learn how to smoke it. Okay, so that one's new. I've never heard of that one before, but I'm excited to learn with you guys. So let's go ahead and give Chris a big welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that introduction. And Donna, you are the most graceful host, and thank you so much just for being you. I appreciate you so much. And Sam, holding down the fort. Thank you, guys. Okay, I think I'm going to stand for the beginning. Yeah, so I saw a couple names that are really familiar to me. So if we know each other, we're friends, we're kind of in the same circle, say, hey. And I assume that a lot of us are going to have a first-time connection. So welcome. Thank you for spending your Saturday with me. I hope that we have a lot of good conversation and fun throughout. I imagine as like you got the email feed or some kind of social media feed that you're just like, what is happening right now? But I really do hope to provide like this really good foundation of historical references to the therapy to where you feel absolutely confident that it's well within your scope of practice. I know for me as a practitioner, when I started to recommend this to my clients, I needed to feel in full integrity that this is something that we're able to actually recommend to our clients. And I hope that you actually leave here today feeling really confident in kind of recommending specific basic protocols and that you start to integrate it into your practice. So let's get started. Hi, Mark. Nice to see you. Okay. Alrighty. So we're going to talk about steaming the Jade Gate, and we'll talk about terminology a little later, but Jade Gate is basically like an East Asian literature bedroom arts translation of vagina. So I kind of thought we might say Jade Gate versus like vaginal steaming, just to kind of ease into it, ease into the conversation a little bit. All right, so let's get steamy. This stool is a really beautiful stool made by a close friend of mine. She's also an acupuncturist and a womb worker, womb healer. Her name is Jivon. And she actually wrote a really beautiful paper for her doctorate that I'm going to actually talk about and tie in a bit later. But this is a custom stool that she actually makes. All right, so before we kind of move into things, I feel like it's important for you to know who I am, where I'm coming from, and how I kind of incorporated this into my practice. So I actually live in Santa Barbara, and I think I saw somebody from Santa Barbara. If you do, we need to connect. So I'm new to Santa Barbara. We actually uprooted and moved from San Diego. We used to live in San Diego. That's kind of where my family is from, where all of my friends are. But my husband got into a doctorate program at UCSB. He's majoring in history. He's a history guy, and so we're there for several years. So it was actually not too difficult of a process to actually uproot my practice because a lot of what I do is online consultations. I have a big online presence where I do treatment plans and recommendations, and I feel more kind of like a life coach than an acupuncturist and an herbalist rather than an acupuncturist. I do have a practice in Santa Barbara, but that's like 2 days a week, and then the other 3 days a week is just online immersion with clients kind of all over the world. I have several e-courses that I teach to the general public, because as I'll talk about, one of my passions is to really change this paradigm where women's health is at a foundational level changing to where we have more natural approaches and how to actually heal ourselves. So some of the e-courses that I actually teach are right here listed. Oh, the volume is too high. Is there? Oh, okay. So I'm also, like Donna mentioned, I'm the resident acupuncturist at Peristeam Hydrotherapy, also called Steamy Chick. Do you guys know about Steamy Chick? Maybe. And I'm also a faculty member at the Wise Moon Medicine Path of Living Arts, and Naomi Love is the creator of that. So what's my passion and my motivation? So this is the pulse that really drives me and what I'm passionate about and what I love about our medicine. I feel really fortunate to be in this lineage. So I really do have a passion to shift a paradigm in how women are cared for in modern times. I feel like our options are very limited, and a lot of our options are extremely invasive. And it doesn't come from a basis of really understanding our basic anatomy and physiology. And so I feel like from a very, very young age, we're just given a very short kind of window of options of how to actually take care of ourselves in a really meaningful way, like all throughout our life cycles. So I'm all about empowering and educating women to deeply have this level of body literacy, so where they understand the mechanisms of their inner workings, and then with that lens really approach their 7-year cycles in a really vital way. And I'm all about community too, so once we get this paradigm shift going, gathering and the elders kind of teaching the younger generations. And I'm actually about to turn 40 this year, and so I feel like I have this kind of natural urge to just really share for just younger generations to come. So there's also this untalked about kind of taboo about blood and menstrual cycles, and I really feel that if young girls are kind of taught to shift their mindset and shift their relationship with that very primal, innate part of themselves, I think the female psyche would just shift in the world, and I feel like that's very important. I also am really passionate about every single one of my clients knowing that their bodies have the most amazing ability to heal themselves. So if they go outside of themselves to kind of seek guidance or healing outside, that basically what that's doing is just freeing up their own healing capability inside. So that's kind of my passions and motivations. Okay, so this is a really funny picture. This is actually my son Atticus in the steam box. So this was really early, and when I started to kind of investigate vaginal steaming and how to incorporate it in my practice. I've actually known about vaginal steaming since I was a young girl. It's actually within my lineage. My mother is from South Korea, and you know, it's not normally something that you just kind of talk about. We just know about it. I have really distinct memories of just going to the local bathhouse in Jinhae, and that always just being an option. If you need that, if you want that, go get a steam. So what they call it is chayok or jwa hun therapy, and we'll actually go into more detail about that a little bit later. But in acupuncture school, it never even crossed my mind, yes, I'm going to steam everybody. Yes, I'm going to smoke everybody. It was kind of just this private thing that's within my lineage, and I never even thought to kind of incorporate it into my practice at all. But then I got a call from a really close friend, and she knew that my mom was from South Korea. She knew that I was in acupuncture school, and she asked me, she's like, do you know what this vaginal steaming thing is? I just went to a Korean spa. And so that's kind of how it started, right? That conversation. And of course, I shared with her how I know about it, what I know about it. And her and I just became really motivated and passionate about sharing such a very subtle and non-invasive therapy to women where they can actually use it in their privacy of their own homes and heal themselves. So that's kind of how it started, way back in like 2014. And so slowly but surely we've been kind of, on a really deep level researching, networking within our circles and just kind of asking elders if they know about the therapy, where does it come from? And we've gathered so much data and so much research that the conclusion is that it's a universal practice and it comes from everywhere. All cultures use it. I bet you anything if you were to ask your great-grandmother, your grandmother, that they know something about it. So just start a conversation. It's probably well within your lineage. So for me as a practitioner, I wanted to feel this full integrity in incorporating it and actually asking my patients to do this therapy. So I dove into a lot of research within our medical texts, and it's there. You just have to look for it. It's not often used today, but it is used today. It's not completely extinct. It's an external herbal therapy, and it's a method of delivering herbs to the body. And we'll go over that later. It's called fumigation. And because it's an external herbal therapy, a lot of the texts are not actually translated. There are a few. But the way that we practice herbal medicine in our profession is mainly focused on NACO, which is internal herbal medicine, and YCO, which is external herbal therapy, has been kind of cut out of the picture, but it is gaining a resurgence and it's super effective. And the way that they actually practice it to be highly clinically effective is to combine the two for the highest clinical outcomes. So yeah, this is back in 2014, my son Atticus, my friend and I were just kind of dreaming up things of how to actually incorporate it and share with the public about this really amazing therapy. And we're both moms, so the kids were kind of running around and playing in the box. Okay, so let's actually just kind of go over what today is going to look like so that you guys have an idea. You guys still with me? Okay. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about what female reproductive wellness is within the lens of our medicine, really. We're going to talk about Jade Gate wellness, Jade Gate meaning vaginal wellness. What is Jade Gate steaming? Where does it come from? Just a really brief history. It's really dense. I have a lot of like sources and references, and I did this whole literature review. I immersed myself in the PCOM library. Anybody from PCOM? Yay! Yeah, so I also utilized my husband's library privileges, like at the university level, and I got books from kind of all across the nation coming in on interlibrary loans, just because I really was passionate about like finding the references within our medicine. So it's definitely there, and it is gaining resurgence. It's being unearthed. So we're kind of in the midst of it right now. So we're going to just talk briefly about the history. I do have a certification course for being like a vaginal steam facilitator with an acupuncture focus, and that goes really into depth about the history, sourcing all the texts not only within Chinese medicine, but just kind of all across the board, all over the world, where they actually reference the therapy. And then we're going to go over what they actually term it within our medicine, which is fumigation, which is a lovely name, right? Not really. But that's, if you kind of understand why they translated it that way, and we'll kind of go into that, it kind of makes sense. So we're also going to talk about what steaming can treat, what common patterns are best treated with steam. There's some really obvious ones, of course, but then not so obvious ones, so we'll go over that. And then also steam versus smoke. When would you actually steam versus doing smoke therapy? The kind of the bread and butter of the course is the cautions and contraindications. I feel like this is really, really important because steam is not for everybody, and it's not this kind of like open thing where you can steam every single day, every single hour. Just like with anything, there's cautions and contraindications, and our responsibility as practitioners is do no harm, and anything in excess is not good. So we'll also talk about what else it can treat, because fumigation is an umbrella term. It's not only for female conditions. Men also can have inflammation and cold in the perineal area. And it can be really, really effective to treat things like acute prostatitis, chronic prostatitis, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, things like that. So we'll kind of go over that and where you can find references of some herbal formulas for that. We'll talk about some really simple protocols so that you can just start practicing with your clients. And then we'll talk about kind of preventative versus symptomatic protocols. And then common Chinese herbs used in steams. We have such a rich kind of availability of knowledge that we can actually really bring intention to our steam sessions. And with that being said, not every acupuncturist is an herbalist, but I just want to put you at ease in saying that a lot of the medicine is in the steam, and you can use herbs and you cannot use herbs, and still it can be really effective. So I wouldn't let the herb part kind of trip you up or get too complicated about the herb process, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. We're also going to talk about some case studies. I'll present to you how it's been really successful in my practice. And if you want to, we can actually do case studies. Like if you have a patient in mind with a certain set of conditions, we can go through the whole process of like how I would actually formulate a plan. So we can do that too. And then at the very end, we'll do Q&A. All right, everybody still with us? There's some people here live, and then, so it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys are still there, so yay, okay. Okay. Are some of you guys in your pajamas? I would be. It's raining here. Awesome, everybody's in their PJs. We should be in our PJs. Sweats, awesome. Yoga pants, yay.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
You said some of the guys' indications. Have you ever done anything with like a hydrocele or any testicular issues?
Yeah. So one in particular. So there's somebody that has like bleeding in their prostate, and so I'll actually show you how to do it a little bit later. It's a different process, and then you can actually do warmer steam versus cooler steam, because for men it's a little bit different because you want to keep the scrotum actually cooler than warmer for fertility issues. So there's kind of this you have to be a little cautious for steaming for men unless they're kind of in older age and they're not thinking about their fertility. They just want to get better and have relief down there. But we'll talk about the healing mechanism of steam. And for steam, I find is better than smoke for men's, because it's kind of, it has this like softening quality. It circulates and moves, but it just relaxes things that are too tight, or if there's like you said, hydrocele, like something that's like kind of constricting and, space.
Okay.
Yeah, so it frees up space. Yeah, if you have one in mind, we can actually go through the whole process.
Okay.
Yeah, does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay, okay, PJs. So I feel like before we actually go into talking about steaming, we use steaming for the purpose of improving female wellness, reproductive wellness. So I feel like it's really important to actually define how our medicine sees reproductive wellness. And it's definitely different than a modern mindset, a modern Western mindset. And that's just something that I hope as our community can provide to the general public, a shift in paradigm where we can actually really have time to educate our patients on just having this different lens on their health. So reproductive wellness, meaning hormonal harmony. And I also feel like it's important to have support and education around all the seasons of a female's life, all the way from menarche to menopause, including pregnancy and postpartum, and really, really understanding their menstruating years. And I feel like our medicine has such a rich source of that, learning through the lens of the 7-year cycles, perceiving blood as essence, as your jing. I feel like that kind of mindset is so beautiful, and it's very true. So seeing the menstrual cycle as this really golden opportunity to enhance your health rather than seeing it as an inconvenience or a burden. Vaginal health is not really a subject that's talked about a lot. I feel like in my early 20s, when I first got my yeast infection, I was freaked out and embarrassed to go to the doctor. So where do you go? You go to those aisles in the pharmacy or grocery store, and you have lots of options of how to heal yourself. But with that being said, are you truly treating the issue, or are you just kind of covering it up? And for me, it became this really vicious cycle of reoccurrence. And so I just had to stop using those products and try to treat it naturally, and that was way more effective. But we're not taught as young women to use clean products or be mindful of what we're actually introducing to our vaginal canals. We're like, plug it up with whatever you have down the aisle and available with all these synthetic ingredients. You're not taught about your, your cervical fluid. There's this really horrific thing on social media right now where they're daring young girls to show their panties with nothing on their panties, as if that's a sign of health. And if you have anything on your panties, that means that you're not healthy. So this is the kind of shift in paradigm that I'm talking about. It's like that severe miseducation about just these really natural, healthful processes that happen in our unique anatomy and physiology that is just not being taught, and how to actually approach that in a really non-invasive and healthful way. So I'm really passionate about vaginal health too, and we can talk about that if you guys have questions later. Sexual health is really important for women. Sex is important for men. Sex is important for women. And I feel like that's kind of downplayed a little bit. But sexual cultivation practices for women to kind of integrate into your body as a whole is healing for the whole entire body. All right. So I kind of want to, just give you a lens of how, I guess I perceive Western medicine to view women's health. And I really encourage you to investigate the history of modern gynecology. It's not a very pretty story. I think recently they actually removed a statue in New York of the father of gynecology because of just his beginnings and the horrific kind of practices that he had on black women. So in Western medicine, a lot of the model that we get is coming from like Greek medicine, where the male body was actually used as the universal model. And so women's bodies were seen as like little men, basically, and they just had these kind of extra parts. And so these were the extra parts that caused them to be, kind of hysterical or not normal, basically. And so how could they kind of take away these kind of things? So they, how do we control it? How do we take it out? How do we stop these processes? And yeah, so we were kind of seen as these kind of small men with extra parts, and that these extra parts just had nothing to do with our systemic and holistic well-being. And I feel like that really resonates into what how the medicine is practiced today, because I don't know if any of you have ever been into the doctor's office where they educate you on your menstrual cycle, or they give you natural options to actually approach your hormones. I remember in my early teens, I had 2 periods a month, really, really painful. And so my parents did what any parents did. You take them to the hospital, you go to a gynecologist, you get things checked out. Within minutes, I was put on birth control pills. Anybody have that experience? Yeah. So I feel like our options within the Western medical realm are really limited, and it's really about kind of controlling, stopping our menstrual cycle. And I feel like it's so pervasive to where even girls are like, yeah, I don't want my period. I don't want my period for months on end, because we're taught that that's not going to affect us. We're not told later in life how that's going to affect us, or in the moment how that's going to affect our overall health. And it's just that idea that is not going to, that has no influence on your whole being. It's just this separate part of you, which we know in our medicine is absolutely not true. So there's a lot of lack of education, and I do feel that in our profession we just have so much opportunity to teach the general public what we know. And it starts with your patients. So hopefully you're sharing these wisdoms with your clients, talking about periods and how to read their blood, because it's like a barometer of their health. Postpartum care, there's a lot of upsurge and passion and motivation. I have a friend who wrote the 4th trimester. Her name is Kimberly Ann Johnson. If you work with postpartum women, that's a really great recommendation. And then menopause, the second spring. Women kind of, this is a daunting kind of time, but within our medicine, we know that it's kind of this natural transition into the wise years where we're not necessarily birthing next generations, but we're kind of birthing ourselves in service to our greater community. So I feel like as a culture, we definitely normalize reproductive challenges as like, well, you're a woman, it's your burden to bear. That's just how it is. Periods are painful. That's just how it is. It's your curse, it's your burden. And we just know that that's not true. So Sun Sum Yao, you guys know him, right? He's an ancient practitioner in our profession, and he actually helped shape the history of Chinese gynecology. Yeah. All right. So the concept of that women are little men. Do you guys know Sabine Williams? She's also a really great person to follow. She translates a lot of our ancient texts, and she's very, very heavily focused on women's health within Chinese medicine. So she's a really great resource if you're interested in that. So as the quote says, as many historians have stated, in the history of Western medicine, this attitude is the logical outcome of the early Greek medical model of a one-sex body, based on the male as the norm and centering anatomy rather than function. So I don't know if you guys know this either, but in research studies, women were excluded from research studies until recently because our hormones are kind of all over the place. It's like, how is that easily controlled, right? And so we were kind of eliminated from research studies for a long time, but get this, we're still prescribed the drugs as if it's not going to affect us with our unique hormonal differences. So there's this huge disregard for the female experience, and that's a real shame. We're half the population. So as a result, the female body is in this model as seen as a deviation from what's normal due to the presence of a uterus, which makes women prone to physical and physiological disorders and weaknesses. So I feel like that's so true. I think culturally our periods are seen as a weakness. It's seen as an inconvenience. That's like better off we just don't have it. So we go to the doctor and we get pills to where we just don't bleed. And we're not taught that that's not ideal. But we know in our medicine that it creates a lot of situations for blood stagnation and stasis that can cause systemic effects in the body. So Sabine Williams, definitely check her out. Yeah, so if you look, I think actually if you look up Sabine Williams, you can actually find that. Okay, so Sun Simiao, here's an amazing picture. That's amazing. So he actually said that women's health is central to the health of the family. So I feel like there's like this modern saying about that too. It's like happy wife, happy life. So even the ancients knew it, guys. Okay, so another translation from Sabine. The reason why separate formulas exist for women is the transformation. So all the kind of unique things that happen to our body that don't happen to men's body. Pregnancy, childbirth, and the severe loss of jing, of blood, through menstrual cycles, monthly menstrual cycles, through the birthing process, and so forth. So for this reason, women's diseases are 10 times more difficult to cure than men's. And I agree with that. We are very dynamic beings. But I do feel like if you understand the kind of physiological functions of our body, then you can approach it in that way and be so much more effective, not only for your personal health, but as a practitioner. Okay. So this is running rampant in our country, at least when I was a teenager. And I don't know if you guys have teenage girls, and that's still the kind of practice that happens where it's just so easy to be put on birth control pills. I'm holding teen circles in Santa Barbara, and I'm working with my patients that are mothers of teenage girls, and the conversation of birth control pills come up a lot, and they're like, I don't want my daughter to get on it, but they really want to. Can we hold a class to kind of discuss, their options? And I feel like it's easy to put girls on pills because of the pregnancy factor. If you instill fear in them that they can get pregnant at any moment, the idea of taking a pill is so much more convenient than having that kind of fear that they can get pregnant at any moment. But I feel like it's kind of condescending in a way because we have no faith that they're able to actually track their cycles that are actually super rhythmic and super cyclic, and they only have this really tiny window when they're fertile, where men are the ones that are fertile all the time, right? And so it's like the fear of fertility. We kind of instill that into our young. So it's a way of kind of controlling pregnancy with fear and medication. And we're not teaching girls that the period that they actually have on their periods is not actually a real period. It's basically like that 1 week that they're taking sugar pills, it's because of the absence of the drugs that they're actually bleeding. So it's not really a bleed. So we're not taught to trust our bodies. We're not taught about our unique processes and how to actually approach them in a really effective and meaningful way. Doctors, of course, know better than you, so you trust that they have your best interest in mind. And, you know, it's just seen as a curse, as your burden to bear because you're a girl. And so there's a lot of shame behind that. And that really affects the psyche of the female, is that you're unclean, you have this process about you that you have to hide. God forbid you bleed out at school. How embarrassing would that be? And I feel like it's because you have to hide this thing that 50% of the population experience. And this is where you came from, you know, and I think there's not an honoring in that. There's more shame associated with it. So yeah, just the lack of education. I feel like that's kind of the ringing tone throughout the whole lecture. Sorry, guys. And also, you know, that ovulation for us is not just for birth. It's not only for procreation, that it's this process that happens in our body that's a source of energy, and how you can actually harness that for your health and vitality and longevity. All right, so how do we empower our female patients? So I think first and foremost, kind of teaching them about their body. I have all of my distance clients on an e-course, so they get free access to an e-course where they kind of learn about things in modules, and they kind of take it slow so it's not so overwhelming. You know, you talk about basic anatomy and physiology and how our medicine views those specific body parts, and talk about hormones and the general kind of menstrual cycle ups and downs, all experienced in 1 month, and why we're dynamic, and why it's so hard for us to kind of function in this linear capacity, and just kind of learning how to ride those waves with understanding the whole entire menstrual cycle. And then also, you know, with steaming, as we'll talk about, it's so much more than treating conditions. It helps to kind of reconnect and integrate such a vital part that's normally cut off. I feel like, I don't know if you guys experience this, but how some of your patients are just so unaware of things below the belt, sensations, you know, even looking at their blood or just reporting to you how often they bleed. Yeah. So of course, that everybody, not only women, are their own healer. They have this inner pharmacy inside that's very, very potent. And one of my mentors, Dr. Roger Honka, he's a teacher of Tai Chi. And are we okay, Sam? We're okay? Okay. That the most profound medicine is within. He's a Qigong and Tai Chi teacher. He's really amazing. I think another way that we can really integrally support and empower women is through community, and having elders really guide the young in really nature-based practices in how to actually approach their health, and you know, giving them all the options. This is what they have to offer in Western medicine, and if that's what's for you at this moment, definitely. But here are some other things that you can actually turn to if and when you're ready. Yeah. All right, so Chinese medicine and female wellness. So how many of you guys agree that blood is a vital sign? Anybody? And then how many of you actually ask your patients about blood quality? Awesome. Yeah. And then how many of you actually teach your clients how to read their blood? Like kind of decipher, you know, different nuances. Like if you have mucus or if it's dark. Yeah. So blood is definitely a vital sign. It's a monthly report card. And I feel like that's such a gift. Like, you know, it's such a gift, like almost looking at the tongue. You get this internal view of what's happening in your body monthly. It's like a monthly report card. Like, how did I do in the last month to really enhance my health? So I feel like it's really a gift. So menstrual blood is also an expression of Jing, of essence, and we'll definitely get into conversation about that. Awesome. So Dr. Leah Andrews, do you guys know who she is? Dr. Leah Andrews? She's an acupuncturist in our profession, and she wrote her doctorate. I think she actually has a book on postpartum recovery. It's a postpartum recovery plan. And she also wrote a book called 7 Times a Woman, which I feel like everybody should have. I actually have it here. Can I get up and show? So it's this book here, 7 Times a Woman. And this is an amazing resource. Do you want to take a look at it? So this book really has this lens of approaching your 7-year cycles. And I feel like one day, hopefully, it'd be nice to have, 8-year cycles for men and kind of how to approach that. There is a book, I forget the author, it's called The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity. And that's, oh yeah, that's a really amazing book. Just for everybody to have. You should definitely have that in your bookshelf. But that really talks about inner alchemy practices for men and how to approach that. So Dr. Leah Andrews, she has a series that I took years and years ago. I think it's called Flourishing Yin. And she talked about these 3 golden opportunities. So as women, we have 3 golden opportunities to really influence our health. And one of them is menstrual cycles, postpartum care, how we actually take care of ourselves in the postpartum, and perimenopause, which, as you know, the 5th cycle of life, when you turn 35, is actually when you should start preparing for menopause. Because at the age of 35, chi and blood dramatically drop. Yeah. So these golden opportunities, if we kind of see through these lenses, then we know that if we take care of ourselves during the menstrual cycles, it's for our vitality. It is for our longevity. How we age. Are we aging too quickly? Are we burning both candles at both ends? Are we only living for the now, or are we also living for our future? So she talks about that quite a bit. Also, I teach my clients about the 7-year cycles of women, and I kind of point out where they are, and that each cycle has these kind of sets of practices that you can actually instill to kind of help yourself not experience those cycles dramatically. Because what those signal is a change or a transition in your life process that's actually natural. And so the ancients actually observed this through nature of, nature and humans, and saw these kind of patterns happening, and then just laid out for us all these strategies that we can do to slow the aging process, to live in more vitality, and to feed our longevity. So there's a really cool saying that we stop borrowing from our futures. So we're not like cutting years off later in life. Okay, so also inner alchemy practices, and we'll kind of cover a few, and sexual well-being. So steaming is a really great way. I don't know if you guys talk to your guys' patients about sexual trauma, but it's so common that I feel like it should be kind of marked off on your intake. And that could be the turning point in somebody's healing. And we really have to consider that. So with steaming, it's such a gentle way for somebody to be reintroduced to a body part or an area of the body that has been kind of locked up in trauma. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they're experiencing some of the things that they're experiencing. Infertility or sustained pelvic pain or sex during or pain during sex, and these kind of things that are just kind of like, oh, that's not really a big deal when they are really big deals. So sexual well-being, I feel like, is super important for our overall well-being. And I feel like a lot of times, you know, after postpartum, when you, it's kind of basically a checkup with the doctor to give the okay to go have sex. And that's kind of it. You're not really talking about how you're feeling about it. Are you completely healed? So I feel like sexual well-being for women is kind of disregarded when it's such an integral part of our longevity and health also, just as much as men. All right, so I give this to every one of my patients. And the colors are a little skewed here, but when you print it out, it's pretty vibrant. So I teach my clients how to know their flow, how to actually read their blood and look at it. So these are just some common things that they can kind of read from their blood if it looks that color. And what we're always striving for is rich, healthy red blood that's kind of like a deep cranberry color. All right, menstrual jing. So, I do teach my clients about blood, and it's not always the most comfortable conversation because, you know, it's blood. And so there, you know, some people get really squeamish about it. So this might be kind of an overshare, but my two young boys, I have two young boys, Atticus and Abram, and I've never hid the fact that I bleed monthly. I just don't. I don't see why that's necessary. I feel like that feeds into the idea that it's gross, that it's like shameful. And I remember when they first started to formulate words and sentences and they saw that I bled, they were really concerned. They were like, "Mom, are you hurt? Are you okay?" And I feel like it could go one of two ways. You can tell them lies, or you can tell them the truth. And so I chose to tell them the truth, that I bleed every single month. And it's because I didn't have a baby this month, you know? And so I feel like they're really smart at a young age, and they get that, you know? And so I feel like if you teach them young, then they just know that that's a process that women naturally go through. And it's not anything scary. It's not anything gross. My mom is still my mom, and she bleeds. How do you guys feel about that? I know it's a little controversial. Anyways, there's this really great book, Women in Taoism, and it talks about menstrual blood as an alchemical ingredient, equating it to jing. So the importance of blood as an alchemical ingredient in women first appears in the Tao Shu of the 11th century. It notes that the red snow in women is modified by their jing as blood, and that they therefore can grow children in their wombs, but this womb jing can also be transformed into higher forms of energy. So this is really crazy, right? Like, like this is pretty much telling women that your blood is not only for procreation. It is for your body's vitality, and you can harness the power behind your menstrual cycle, your jing, to process other things, and it's not only for procreation. And we'll talk about what I call menstrual attunement and attuning into your menstrual cycles to actually increase productivity. Yeah. All right, so we also know it as heavenly water, or tiangui, and it's the substance that is necessary for the promotion, growth, and development of reproductive functions in the body. And this book is really great. I have it here, actually, The Essential Woman, and it talks about how the uterus deals with the purest parts of our jing, the purest parts of our blood. And the reason why it's the purest part is because that's what's going to nourish future generations in the world. So it views blood as, I mean, and it's true, it's nourished every single person on this planet. So, shifting mindset. Do you guys like this picture? Yeah. I need privacy in the bathroom too. Yeah. It's kind of hard to do when they're young though. So this picture is really amazing. I really resonate with it. Partly because it's the woman is naked, and it kind of shows a bit of a flow outside of her and how that kind of feeds into Mother Earth. And so I feel like if you guys could just imagine for a minute that young girls are kind of taught about like something like this versus like, oh, you got your period, don't forget to like take your, you know, tampons and pads and, you know, be discreet, you have to hide it. So, and it's not like you're saying outlandish that that's something that you should be ashamed of, but why? Why do I have to hide it, you know, for the convenience of everybody else, and you're inconveniencing me? Like I have to take this extra layer of precaution to make sure everybody else is comfortable and I'm not. So I feel like we could do a lot of things by just kind of shifting the mindset around menstruation. And there's some changes actually happening now, where menstrual cycle awareness is kind of out there. You know, periods are kind of being normalized and talked about, and I feel like it's a change for the good. And I know that it can be uncomfortable in the initial stages, but I really do feel that it's important. I feel like also too, because it's really crazy how sick we are as females. Like we are just not doing well. There's so much infertility, unexplained infertility. We have really major things: fibroids, endometriosis, PCOS, you know, hemorrhaging, you know, bleeding for months on end, and the doctor's just not really thinking that it's a big deal. That's your jing being lost on a small scale every single day. That is a major issue. Yeah. All right. This is a really amazing book. I've read a lot of books, guys. So your libraries are going to grow a bit. So this book is really amazing. It's called Her Blood is Gold by Laura Owen. And this is kind of her life story about how she kind of changed her relationship with her menstrual cycle. And she says, the political and social impact of our collective denial of the power of the menstrual cycle should not be underestimated. And then further, she talks about, by becoming aware of its power and potential, we could stabilize our social fabric to a far greater degree. And I absolutely agree with that. And it's not anything kind of woo-woo. You know, when you think menstrual power, it's like, oh, it's like harnessing energy, and that. It can be that, absolutely. But I feel like it's more where women kind of come into their knowing and in full integration and kind of walking through the world in that manner. I feel like that's kind of what this resonates to me. Yeah. Okay. This is a really great Native American saying. It's really beautiful. This should be printed and hung up in your office or something. But yeah, I mean, a lot of traditional cultures actually taught about the power of your menstrual cycle. And associated women to be tied to the moon phases, and associated women to be kind of powerful beings of that thin veil between, you know, the wild and human experience. So yeah, this is a really beautiful thing. Everybody doing okay? Okay. So introducing your cyclic nature. So this is one of the first books that I ever had. Do you guys also have it? Mine's here. The copy is so old and tattered. I remember reading this book when I was in my 20s, and it changed everything for me. And it's kind of what prompted me to want to go in a natural healing field. And acupuncture just was kind of a natural progression because everybody in my family in South Korea, they go to see the blind acupuncturist. They are the most sought out because, they have other sensory things that are heightened. And it's, I think the government actually seeks out the blind and pays for their schooling, and that becomes their profession, which is really beautiful. So, introducing your cyclic nature, and we're all rhythmic beings. I think, what is it? Not the Pulitzer Prize. Maybe it's the Pulitzer Prize. Or the Nobel Prize. There, a couple years ago, some doctors actually received a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering the circadian rhythm, like scientifically. But this is, of course, something that we've always known within our medicine. So I'll just do this slide and then we can change. Okay. So Dr. Kristin Northrup, she actually talks about this connection that we have to rhythms, natural rhythms, seasonal rhythms, cyclical rhythms. And she says, the menstrual cycle is the most basic, earthy cycle that we have. Our blood is our connection to the archetypical feminine. The macrocosmic cycles of nature, such as the ebb and flow of the tides and the changing of the seasons, are reflected on a smaller scale in the menstrual cycle of the individual female body. The monthly ripening of an egg and subsequent pregnancy or release of menstrual blood mirrors the process of creation as it occurs not only in nature unconsciously, but in human endeavor. Oh my gosh, how beautiful is that? And this is coming from an actual doctor, and I think that's why it resonated with me so much to read that a medical doctor is talking in this way. So it gave me a lot of hope that the paradigm could be shifted to see female bodies in a more holistic way. Yeah. And in many cultures, the menstrual cycle has been viewed as sacred. Yeah. So we're going to pause right here. Sam's going to change out a tape really quick.